This is Subsurface Podcast, Episode 2. And this is solo, and what we're going to be talking about is I'm going to go over my journey through the workforce, where it all started, and how I tried finding my way throughout the years. It's very layered, really, because to this day, I feel like I haven't technically found my way, but in a sense, I have. You find yourself over the years with different kinds of experiences. You start realizing what kind of person you are and what kind of role you play in the workforce, and whether you're going to be someone who just works just to have enough money to get by, or if you're the kind of person that goes job to job to try to find happiness, or you're the kind of person that works for a company for a very long time and is very successful with that, or whether you go the self-employed route. And so I'm pretty much just going to be going over how things changed for me over the years, up to where I'm at now. And hopefully anyone that listens or watches this that is pretty much either new in the workforce, or they're at a job where they just don't know what to do, they don't think it's working out, and they don't know whether to go look for another job somewhere else or change their perspective of the place that they're at and try to just improve the place that they're already at. A lot of times that's a better situation. It's a better way to go about things than just changing jobs. So this might not be quite as good as the last one, and what I mean is I just recorded episode 2 yesterday, but somehow the audio got corrupted and I couldn't use it. I tried finding my way around it for like 2 hours trying to figure it out, so I had to re-record it all over, and that was about 45 minutes or so. So let's see where it goes. So my journey through the workforce, trying to find my way. The thing is that for years and years, literally up until recently, by recently I mean up until the past maybe 6 years. No, a little bit further than that. It's been a little bit longer than that. But for the longest time, from the age of like 15, 16, when I started working, 18, 21, 22, I wasn't really focused on getting really good at something, looking for the right job, the right career. I was just kind of like going to work just to say that I had a job and I was paying my way through life. I wasn't taking much too seriously. I do know when I started taking it more seriously, though. In 2011, I was in Texas. I came back to Florida, and I started working for an appliance company, which I ended up being with them for 7 years. And shortly after I started there, I ended up having my daughter came into the world. So, of course, everything changes. And you start taking things more seriously, trying to make sure that you got, some security for your family. And, when I was with that company, I realized that they were more than willing to have me in like a leadership role if I was up for it. So I became the yes man. I was just saying yes to whatever they wanted me to do, which ended up making me go to Miami and back 3 days a week for like 2 years. Routing some new guys, training them and setting up their routes, training guys in different cities, going to different states as well, and all over the state of Florida and about 3 other states. And yeah, I learned a lot from that job, and just kind of being the yes man made a huge difference, because all of a sudden they were molding me into what they needed me to be, which in a lot of ways I had no idea I was really capable of it. So then I got to a point where everyone's looking up to me and asking me for advice on day-to-day things. Now, my first ever job was at a McDonald's when I was 15 or 16. I never remember how old I was when I started, but my mom actually was working there. She that's a whole nother topic. My mom. But she basically was in the restaurant business for a long time, most of her life, I think. And, she ended up working for a McDonald's, and she was a manager there. And when I was in my final year of high school, she asked me, she said, I know you're looking for a job. Why don't you just work here? I can get you a job tomorrow. So I went ahead and started, and it was my first job. I was making $5.50 an hour, $5.50, and I was still in high school, but I was working almost full time. It was like 30, 32 hours, somewhere borderline there, whatever they could legally have me work while I was in school as a minor. And yeah, I was there for like less than a year. Can't say I learned too much from that, except for I don't want to do that ever again. I don't really want to ever work in the restaurant business, much less fast food. Um, and I remember quitting that job because there was some scheduling miscommunication where I'd made plans for like New Year's Eve, and the request for that day off or leaving early, whatever it was, didn't get to the manager that it needed to get to. And he told me I had to be there, I had to work, or I was going to get in trouble. And I was like, you know what? I quit. Of course, the job wasn't that important to me at the time. I left there and I went to, well, I was finishing up high school and I started looking for other jobs, and I ended up getting hired by a Super Walmart and a Quaker Steak and Lube. And they both hired me. I went to the orientation and all that stuff, but before I could actually start working there, I remember I was in a very bad accident. Some of you may, if you know me personally, may have heard of it. Basically, this lady was working at a steel mill down the street from my house, and she got caught snuffing paint, like smelling paint fumes and getting high. So, like an idiot, her manager sent her home in a company truck. And she drove away, and then she came around the corner and just kind of blacked out and ran off the road and slammed into my bedroom of my house. And yeah, I had two friends with me. It was a crazy scene. No one died, but me and a friend of mine got hurt pretty bad, and I could barely walk. I couldn't really get out of a car. So yeah, I kind of just stayed inside. I went to a friend's house and stayed with him for a few days. And then I remembered, oh shit, these people hired me. I totally forgot. So I called them, and they didn't hear from me, so they ended up letting me go. They fired me before I could even start, which was just embarrassing, really. So after those two jobs, I ended up going to be a busboy at a steakhouse. It was called Buffalo Steakhouse, and they're no longer in business. So I did that just to kind of jump into another job. And then when I turned 18, this was right after I graduated. When I turned 18, I got a job at a Cain's Distribution Center, a furniture warehouse. And I learned some things there. I learned a lot about OSHA. I learned a lot about operating a forklift, operating other machines that lift up to the top of the warehouse and put boxes away, moving around heavy stuff. Yeah. Excuse me. I was with that warehouse environment for about a year and a half. Learned some things there, and I got up to $10 an hour there. This was like 2006 ish. And then from there, I'm not going to remember all the jobs I had, to be honest. I'm not going to remember all of them. I did have quite a bit of jobs, and I'm not going to remember all of them or the dates or anything like that. I remember at some point after that, I went to deliver furniture with Ashley Furniture as a contractor, driving a 26-foot truck, delivering furniture wherever the hell it needed to go, upstairs, in a tight room, whatever. And I kind of learned like the contractor life there, about how cutthroat it can be and how much you can lose out just by not being lucky. Like, you'd have to show up there 45 minutes away from my house or more, and you'd have to sit there and wait at 5 in the morning to see if you got a route for the day. And if you were lucky enough to get a route, then you had to load your truck, inspect all the furniture, make sure you loaded it to where it wouldn't get damaged on the way, go to your first stop, giving them all call aheads ahead of the time, by the way, and then do your thing. Every day was the same. And yeah, and of course driving a truck like that around traffic is just a whole nother skill set and stressor. And after that, I worked for a small tool shop. I worked for a company where I did some paint stripping, sandblasting. Like an old car would come in the shop and I would just blast all the paint off to the bare metal so they can get restored. Did some minor marine field work as well because the owner of that company had another company in the same building where he built race engines for outboard boats, did service, stuff like that. And I'm just kind of going off on the experiences I had, and then I'll talk a little bit about how I shaped into a different person along the way. Once I really decided I wanted to try to be successful and not just spend my days working for somebody for a small amount of money. Let's see, after that, actually, this was around 07 and 08 where the housing crisis happened and the economy took a tank, and I got laid off like 3 times in 1 year. So 2008, early 2009 was pretty rough. And I got laid off a lot, and I was just kind of sick of it. I ended up going to Texas, where I was born, and living with my dad for about a year and a half. And there I was also a contractor as my primary job. I was installing kitchen appliances in new houses and outdoor grills and all that stuff. This job right here actually gave me an eye-opening perspective on a lot of different things, because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was in these multi-million-dollar mansions, 3-story house, installing a full-size kitchen on every floor that had $20,000 to $30,000 worth of appliances each. And seeing people that built houses where they had hidden rooms, hidden movie theaters behind a false wall, like all kinds of crazy stuff. Bowling alleys, I've seen it all. And that was very eye-opening to see all that stuff. And while I was doing that, I had a weekend job as well. Because in Texas, I didn't know anybody. I just knew my dad. I didn't have any friends. The whole time I was there, in fact, hopefully I can adjust this without making any noise. While I was there, oops, there we go. While I was there, I didn't hang out with anybody, didn't have any girlfriends or anything like that, so I was just working all the time. 7 days a week, 2 jobs. The weekend job was, I was state certified for emissions testing on cars, so they would come in for an oil change. I would test the emissions, see if they would pass, do safety inspections and all that stuff. Luckily, we don't have that here in Florida, but in Texas they do, and yeah, that was interesting as well, having a bunch of people that tried passing a test that was, federally mandated for that state, or state mandated, whatever, however you want to look at it. They would get mad at me because their car failed because they couldn't get the check engine light on. And I was always, pretty comfortable around cars, so that was easy. I would do an oil change and some other service, and then I would, put a car on this rolling, basically like a dyno. And when I finally left Texas and came back to Florida, that's when I joined the appliance company. And I was with them for 7 years. And like I said, I learned a lot from them. And had a lot of experiences in that place, wild experiences. I mean, imagine going to someone's house to do whatever, deliver a washer and dryer or fix one. And they know you're coming, and then anything from a girl that answers the door not wearing much to a 50-year-old guy wearing a dress, lipstick, and earrings. Kind of weird. Nowadays, I know we're pretty used to it, but for me, back in 2011, it was still odd to see that. And I also did repossessions for that company, so I'd go to the roughest neighborhoods of Miami, St. Pete, wherever. I'd have to knock on these people's door and say, hey, I know you got kids, but I'm here to take your washer and dryer. It's very weird. And after that, that's when I left that industry. I basically wanted to get into the auto industry. I was familiar with cars, and I worked on them all the time, and I wanted to work in the car industry. And if you know me, I was into Volkswagens for a long time. So I wanted to kind of get into that brand or support the brand. And I worked for a Volkswagen dealer. I was there for less than 2 years. I started out in the parts department, went and started doing oil changes. And I was in this fast-paced express oil lube bay. And after a while, I would do some side work. Some of the mechanics would need some extra work done, like some brakes or whatever, and I would knock that stuff out for them too. But the funny thing is, and some of the guys there, like, well, one person in particular was just like this alpha male dickhead and just didn't think highly of anybody. And then, here I am one day changing oil on a car and rotating the tires. And then, the next day after hours, I bring my car in and I'm pulling the transmission out of my car, tearing it down to nothing, rebuilding the transmission and putting a limited slip differential in it and doing all this work. And he's just like, where'd you learn how to do that? And I'm just like, it's a secret. Yeah, I mean, you never judge a book by its cover. But that was a horrible experience. Really, that place was so toxic. I cannot stand the thought of ever working for another dealership again as long as I live. Never again. When I left there, which was like 2018, early 2019, well, that began the next couple of years of my life. That was probably the darkest I ever experienced. And I'm sure on this podcast, I'm going to talk about that a lot. Because a lot went on during that time period. I don't really need to get into it because it's not really work related. Most of it isn't. But it was a very dark time for me. After I left that dealership, I was actually so stressed out. I needed a break. And I took like a solid month off of work altogether, doing absolutely nothing. I had some savings and I was like, you know what? Let me just chill and just stay home and gather myself and just take it a day at a time. And of course, how you would expect, then savings started running down and I was like, all right, I'm ready for work and I'm ready to be an adult. So I started looking for jobs, and until I found what I wanted, I decided to do like Uber Eats and valet parking. And it was kind of fun at first, those two, because like valet parking, you're just sitting there talking to a few dudes for a couple of hours and parking cars here and there, making like no money. Uber Eats was also fun, just driving around listening to podcasts all day long and making some money there, but just enough to get by. And I finally found a job that I took as a mechanic in a small shop. And I was there, I forget how long I was there for, a year? And it just didn't pan out what I thought it was going to be because, well, I had the skill to keep up, but also it was enough of a challenge where I was learning shit all the time. What really killed it for me was they kind of lied about how they would get paid, and I ended up defaulting on this hourly pay, which was $10 an hour. And I was like 30, 31, 32, something like that. And I'm just like, yeah, I can't work for this kind of wage. Like, if we're not busy enough to where I'm getting, percentage of the job that I do and I get put on this default, it's not for me. So I left. Then I started working for a lab company as a contractor, where I would drive all over Florida in my own personal car and like literally tip to tip the entire state. I seen the entire state of Florida, and it's just crazy. And I would basically go to people's houses, schedule with them, and do cheek swabs to be sent off for genetic testing to like evaluate their medication. I would start doing COVID swabs after a while, and that was fucking weird. And a lot of weird eye-opening stuff about COVID too, because of that position I was in. I started noticing some things that didn't line up, And but after a while, that company started rubbing me the wrong way. Like, I found out a few things about them, and they seemed to be like one of those fly-by-night companies, like riding on the coattails of, siphoning money out of the Medicare system. But they would change their name once in a while and move to a different state here and there. And I was just like, all right, let me get the fuck out of this before I get in some trouble. And so then, actually, that's where I landed where I'm at today. I put in a few job applications. I had 3 opportunities that I ended up having to decide from. It was a hard decision to make, honestly. One of them was with Jabil. If you don't know who Jabil is, it's been a while now since I looked into them, but they're basically like, they have a lot of military contracts. They were going to hire me to work in a clean room assembling like electrical components and stuff like that. I don't know what the bigger project was. They probably wouldn't have told me, but they were going to hire me at $12 an hour. And I'm like, no. It would have looked great on the resume, but not for that kind of money. The other opportunity was Alltech, which is a company in South Tampa that basically maintains the utility on the back of those utility trucks. Where they have the boom that goes up to the power lines. There's electrical, hydraulic, mechanical. But I kind of didn't really want to be a mechanic anymore. I was kind of burned out on it, honestly. And the pay was good. They were going to start me off at $23 an hour. But the problem is that it was like 45 minutes or so away from home, and I would have had to take an expressway to get there. So the expenses of getting there and working a job that I didn't really want, I decided to not choose them. And the final was where I'm at now, which is Intrepid Powerboats. And I had several reasons why I chose Intrepid. They didn't start me at the highest rate. They started me $9 an hour less than Jabil, or not Jabil, $9 an hour less than Alltech offered. And but I thought about, if you have experience in the marine field, most of the clientele typically have money, right? So maybe that's a good idea. Get some skills in that realm, and you can take it with you elsewhere. But also, when I came in for the interview and I walked around the premises and talked to some people, the main reason I chose this company that I'm with now is because there was just like countless people working there that had been there for 10 years, 15 years, 18, 20, 25, 30. A bunch of people that have been there for a long time. And now that I've been there for 3 years, I've noticed that there's a certain percentage of people that come and go, people that don't stick around. It's kind of how it is with any company. But you still have a lot of these people that have been there for 20 plus years. And I think it says a lot. If they're going to stick around for a company, it means a lot of different things, not just the pay, the environment, the people you work with, the benefits, everything. So I'm glad the choice I made. I think I did not make a mistake whatsoever. I have no regrets about joining this company. And to this very day, I'm not trying to replace them. So I'm really happy about that. And honestly, that long-winded talk about my experiences from the beginning to here is kind of to say that I'm just in a good spot. Like, I'm not making $1 million a year, but all things considered, comparing where I am now, physically, mentally, financially, compared to where I was in 2019, when everything started going downhill, I cannot explain how different it is. And now I get to finally take a breath, but I don't know. There's so much to say about it, I'll touch on it a little bit of what happened in that time period, and like I said, most of it's not work related, but there's a series of events that just kept hitting me, I got to a point where I thought that something was like out to get me. I swear, like, I had bad luck for real. Like, I thought, this doesn't make sense. Why is all this stuff happening? It's when things keep happening to you, you kind of adopt this idea, like, why me? Why is it all happening to me? It could be happening to everybody around you, but it feels like it's just happening to you. So it started kind of, when I was at that Volkswagen dealership, this is when COVID first came around, first happened. And, people were all like nervous and acting all funny about it. It didn't really affect me at all yet. But it was just something weird because of how widespread it was, like a panic. And I ended up getting wrongfully fired from that place. And when I got fired, I was really devastated because on one hand, I left a company of 7 years making $50,000 a year to join the dealership making like 25 maybe. I took a huge pay cut to get there and get my foot in the door. And I wanted that to be my career, And to realize that wasn't going to happen and it just foiled was already devastating in itself. So, got all this global panic going on. My girlfriend at the time, her mom is sick. She thinks she got COVID. She's panicking. I get fired. That's nothing. That's just tip of the iceberg. After I get fired, and there's some things I'm not going to admit on this podcast. There's some things that I was going through that I will not even talk about. Only my closest friends know about it. And at least for now, I'm not going to share it with anyone else. But the next thing was that my sister passed away. And it never gets easier. She was 33. And she kind of led a life of drugs and stuff like that. So it caught up with her, unfortunately. So while all these things were going on, I got hit with that, and it was very difficult. But I kept trying to move forward. So I got a tip from a buddy of mine that said, why don't you work for Tesla? You can go through their START program and learn how to work on their cars. It's a school basically that they put on in Miami. So I said, what have I got to lose? So I reached out, applied online, and I got a phone call from some lady with the program. And she says, okay, you're going to be working on cars. You're going to be working on electric cars, high voltage. Everything here is electrical minus a few things like brakes, hydraulic, and other small stuff. But she's like, so I got some questions for you. 10 questions. It's all electrical. Mind you, electrical is not my forte. Like, I know how to work on cars, but like electrical is like very confusing for me personally, especially at the time. So it's just like, I was so nervous. Like, I didn't really know how to answer these questions, but she asked me 10 questions. I got them all right. All 10 of them. And I couldn't believe it. The questions she would ask me, I pretty much had an idea of how to answer it correctly and how to explain the situation that she brought to me. Like if this light is doing this on a car, is it an open circuit, closed circuit, short to ground, stuff like that. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, okay, this makes sense. I explained it, and I got the question right. And I was just like, wow, I don't know how. She says, okay, you got the questions right. We're going to have you talk to one of the instructors of the program, but we're going to have you do a FaceTime interview. So just make sure you're in a quiet place. You could focus and just be zoned in. And so I ended up, I didn't want to be home for that. So I went to a park, set up my camera, and had an interview with the instructor. And it went well. And the guy says, okay, the class starts in 30 days. I'll see you then. And as I packed up my camera and left, and I was driving home, I got rear-ended and my car was totaled. And then I was trying to push through it and be like, okay, well, I have to move from Tampa Bay to Miami, find a place to live. Can I even drive my car there? I don't know. I have to see what insurance says. The insurance totaled it, so I couldn't legally drive the car. So I had to figure out how to repair my car and get it re-inspected, or buy another car when I got the insurance money from that, and also come up with the money to move into a place down in Miami. Miami's extremely expensive, and I didn't really have money at the time. I don't remember how much I had, but it wasn't a lot at all. So I was just kind of stuck, and I just was overwhelmed, and I said, fuck it. I just gave up. I didn't even tell them. I don't think I even reached out and told them I wasn't going to show up. I was just kind of done. So, yeah. And a lot of that stuff is a blur at this point. And that's around the time I was doing those, little jobs with the valet and the Uber. And then I got the job at the mechanic shop, and it just turned out to be crappy as well. Tried to make the best of it, but, it just wasn't very good. And then my relationship I was in, the girl lied to me and broke up with me and ended up seeing another guy. And I was just like, what the fuck? So, and shortly after that, though, is when I started working for Intrepid. And I owe a lot of where I'm at now to the company, but also and the people that work there, but also just other things just got better. You know, a lot of things just got better on their own, and some healing was done, and started making better decisions and all that stuff, and just yeah, a lot of different things changed from then to here. But man, I tell you that there could not be a different life from then to now. So now I'll shift into this next note that I wrote down. The struggle and trauma of life, different situations that I was in life, and how it changed my motivation. So there's so many things where like little issues that just kept me from chasing something. You know, like after that accident happened where that truck hit my house early on, like I already didn't have much motivation at the time anyway. Like no one was pushing me to go to college. You know, like growing up, my mom, largely my mom raised me for the most part. My dad I would go visit, but she basically only had a few rules for me. Don't get arrested, don't get in trouble in school, and don't get anyone pregnant when you're young, you know. So that was it. I all I wanted to do was hang out with my friends, ride my skateboard, play my guitar, play video games, and work for just enough money to like pay gas money because I didn't even have a car early on until honestly I didn't have my own car driving around until I was right before I turned 18. But you know, so as long as I had gas money, money to cover my phone bill, money for food, didn't care about anything else. And so after that whole issue happened, I was just like focused on my social life, you know, just hanging out with people, you know, just living to a small degree, I guess. And just growing up through life, all these different jobs that I had, for some reason, it just never really clicked for the majority of them that, hey, I should become the best I can at this position. I should show them that no one can do it better than me. I can show them that no one will be here more than me. That didn't really click until 2011 when I was with that appliance company. And it wasn't because I had a daughter on the way. It was before that happened. But when my daughter was coming into the world, obviously everything changed. I actually had two jobs. Um, and then that big that big dark time period of 2019, 2020, you know, that was just it was very, very, very stressful to say the least. So, you know, I think I pushed through pretty good because when I was working at the mechanic shop, like, you know, I got along great with everyone that worked there, and I did my best job 110% of any job I had that came through. You know, I was treating it like it was like my mom's car. Like, I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna find out what's wrong with it. I'm gonna show them everything else that's wrong with it, and I'm gonna make sure that whatever repair I do, it's as good as permanent. Period. I'm not half-assing anything. That's how I am. But it was an uphill battle to be that way through the job, through the day, every day, with all the stuff going on. And when I started Intrepid, you know, I went from making a lot more money at the lab company to then going to Intrepid, and it was like a big pay cut from what I was used to. And you know, I was still so affected by the loss of my sister that I couldn't. There was days where I couldn't focus. I'd go into work and I'd be in the middle of something. I would be like inside a boat, rigging it up, like running wires, and you're in this little cavity where no one can see you. You know, you're in this dark hole. You're covered in fiberglass dust, and I'm running wires. And I would just start thinking about my sister, and then just kind of start moving slower and start kind of like tearing up and just like not focusing. And it was so hard, but things, like I said, things got better. So I had some management show me how much they believed in me, and that was huge. There's two people in particular that showed me that they really truly appreciated me being there every day on time, staying late when they need me to, or coming in early. And to give you an idea, my own manager at the time, when I started working there, 5 weeks in from a new hire. 5 weeks in, my own manager said, "Hey, do you want to go over to the quality control department?" And I did, because he saw that, you know, while I did good work, I was still the new guy and learning. I was slow, but he saw my eye for detail and how whatever I was doing it perfect. I didn't do anything half-assed. So he thought I was a good person for that position, and he pushed me into it. And it was like a therapy, really. I remember, in fact, me and Cameron on episode 1 talked about something like this. I'm pretty sure we recorded it in the video. I trimmed some stuff out, but when I started working in quality control, I remember going on sea trials, which I do a lot now. But the first time going out on a boat and you're just cruising very slow in the water, the sun's out, but it's kind of early, and you're there to work, but you're like relaxing on this boat while you're going through these low wake zones. And it just kind of like, in a weird way, it kind of brought me a peace mentally. Like, hey, you're at work, you've been hurting, you've been grinding, you've been doing everything you can. Things are better now. And maybe it was myself kind of forcing me into that mindset. I don't know, but it really helped a lot. And it's been a crazy 3 years. And so, yeah, I guess that's just kind of like a blurry way of going through that note of the struggle and trauma and how it changed my motivations through different jobs that I had. This is a little different here. I was trying to think of what my perspective would be on surviving this economy, because like with everyone in a job, like, no matter where you're at, you're affected by this. If you're a business owner, self-employed, if you're working for a company, whether you're a new employee or you've been there for 5 years or 10 years or whatever, when the economy goes up and down, it affects most of us. And a lot of people, like right now, business has slowed down for a lot of people. Our business has slowed down. Thankfully, the people that run things in this company, instead of laying anybody off, they just kind of draw back on the overtime. So no one got laid off. Everyone's still working, and it feels like they rearranged things with the production schedule where things actually flow better now. And I think, the crazy tempo that we were all in, I think people's tempers have settled down a bit as well, which is funny. But a lot of people say, at least for the ones that are holding back on buying big ticket items like boats, that are $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, they're saying it's because of the election year. It's like, okay, well, we noticed a slow in production and boat sales deep into 2023, maybe halfway through 2023 is when it was brought to my attention. And, election is at the end, essentially, of 2024. If that's what it's really all about, I don't know. Like, I've never been in the position where I let the election year depict whether or not I spend money, It just depends on how the economy is actually doing. If it's harder to save money, I spend less money. That's how it is for me anyway. But when I think about to survive this economy we're in, because right now things aren't that great. They've been worse, but they're not that great, really. I think of, okay, like right now, I do have a little bit less overtime that I'm putting in. So instead of sitting at home relaxing a lot, I decided to I'm looking for a second job and stay busy. I'm doing some other things here and there too. I got some things I can sell for a profit. But I want to pick up a second income where it really takes up a lot of my time, because I got no problem being busy and being a workaholic. I've always kind of defaulted to that. Especially, well, not so much when I'm in a relationship, and I got like, a girl at home and all these things. I do feel guilty about working so much, and I tend to not work crazy hours unless it's absolutely needed. But now, living here single in this one bedroom, I have some more time, so I want to put in the work and start making more money. I think that's what a lot of people should do. If you're just kind of sitting there, just kind of sitting adrift, not really making any headway, getting ahead, saving a lot of money. You're just kind of sitting there stagnant, like I feel like I am. You got to get the gig jobs. For me, I don't like doing the whole Uber Eats thing anymore. That was something I don't want to get back into. But a lot of people do that, like Uber Eats, Lyft, Shopify, all these different things, walking people's dogs for money on the side. For me, I'd rather just find a whole nother job where I work in the evenings, and just earn as much as I possibly can. And I think that's kind of the main way that people can survive this election year, with things slowing down business-wise, and just not let your spending catch up to the lack of savings. And the other thing is, obviously we know if you're going through a hard time, you got to reevaluate your spending. Like what's your daily spending habits? You got to learn how to draw back, get rid of things you don't need. My biggest problem, one of my biggest problems is like food. If I go out to eat somewhere, I buy what I crave. I buy what I want. I don't look at the price. I never look at the price. In fact, where was I at? I either like ran through a Wawa or I went somewhere. Maybe it was like a Smoothie King or something. I bought two things. Wherever I was at, it ended up being like $20-$25. Well, I was buying for me and someone else, and it's like I didn't even look at the price. I'm like, well, that's how much it was. Whatever. That's what I wanted to get. I wasn't gonna get anything less. So, but if I had more willpower, I would have been like, okay, let me get this little thing here. Let me get something off the kids menu. A lot of people are doing that nowadays. Apparently at Chipotle, you can go get a kids meal, some chicken and whatever. They give you 2 tacos instead of this big fat burrito. And instead of spending like $12, you're spending like 5 or 6. So it's kind of smart if you think about it. Or like I actually do most of the time is I make food at home. I cook here all the time. I don't go get breakfast. I don't buy coffees in the morning. I bring lunch with me like 80 to 90% of the time. And dinner, I pretty much also try to have dinner because I make dinner and I cut it in half or thirds or quarters and I bring that for lunch. So I have dinner as well, or I'll cook something new. Unless I'm working super late. We all have those days where we also don't feel like cooking. And then I'll go to, there's like one specific place I go to where I get some food that's actually on the healthy side and it's not that expensive. So there's all different kinds of ways we can practice of making it through a rough spot in the economy. So, and I should probably evaluate that on more in another episode where I kind of break down a bunch of different things. But that was just a small little input. And I want to go back to something I spoke on earlier about the job I had in Texas, working in these mansions and these big houses. And my note says, how does traveling reshape your path? The thing is, it wasn't so much traveling, but it was in Texas. And when I was in these big houses and I saw all these creative things that people were doing when they were doing these new builds, these amazing elaborate outdoor grills, this amazing curb appeal that they brought to life with these contractors that they hired to make their driveway and their front yard just look amazing. And it's not just the front of a house with a straight driveway. They got these amazing pavers and all these crazy things going on, stone everywhere. The inside of the house, just like you're looking at like granite countertops that are not even granite, but they're some crazy stone that I've never seen before. And it makes you think of like, these are human beings that are buying this as a house. They're building this as a house. So whatever they're doing, it's possible. A lot of people can probably do the same thing they're doing and live this extravagant lifestyle. But to me, honestly, I didn't really think of it like that as far as like something that I wanted. I don't really want a 4-story house. I don't want a $10 million home. I don't want a bowling alley in my house. I don't want a 10-car garage. Well, that's debatable because I'm a car guy and I like to have some fast cars. And I think to be completely content, I would need minimum 2 cars, preferably 3, but I'm not going to get into that. That'll be another episode. But to see what's available and what people were actually accomplishing, and I'm not talking about like these rare billionaires, right? And there's a lot of billionaires. I'm talking about people that are just millionaires. That's still obviously a big place to be and a lot of money. But there's so much more millionaires than I thought. what was so eye-opening about me working there in Texas was that there were so many people that were multimillionaires that I was around all the time. Like, I thought millionaires were pretty rare, but it's like, no, there's just a lot more poor people. There's a lot of millionaires, and a lot of, even just a lot of people that make $400,000, $700,000 a year. You know, that money constantly coming in. For me, I'm a lot more modest with what I want, but just, it was eye opening to see all that. That people, like, on a weekly basis are having these houses built that are just worth $14 million. You know, it's crazy. Me personally, um, I just basically want a one-story house, 3-4 bedrooms, um, decent garage, 2 or 3 cars. That's really all I want. Good backyard, you know. I would like to live in the outskirts a little bit, not quite suburbs. You know, rural area would be nice. And actually, to touch on that whole life, like, image that I have and that goal, my whole idea was to get a job that paid well, like some kind of good job that you could make a career, and one that would pay good enough to where I could save enough money to just get into real estate. If I could just buy a property that was like a duplex and rent it out, and just save that money long enough to buy another property to flip or whatever. That was my whole goal. Now, what I decided to do, I haven't done it yet, but what I'm planning on doing this year or next year, preferably, is I want to buy some land, cheap land, and I want to use the land to make money. I'm not going to build a house on it. I'm not going to live on it unless I have to. Like, if shit hits the fan and I have the land, I'll go grab myself a nice camper and live on the property if I have to get out of town or something. But I do want to have some crazy talks like that. Like, you know, conversations like that are so much fun. I'll save that for when I have some company here to make it more interesting. But yeah, so I want to buy some land, make some money off of it, and that's kind of the gateway to my, you know, my dreams, I guess you could say. So yeah, this conversation kind of developed into a weird way, a weird path, I guess, from going just talking about the different jobs I had to talking about, like, you know, buying land and making money off of it. Not so much of like, I want to buy this house, but like anyone who is listening or watching this now, especially if you live in Florida and a lot of places, you realize that like buying a house right now is it's not ideal, because even if you have a big chunk of savings and you're ready for it, if you have enough income to qualify for the loan, you know, like right now they say the average house is like $400,000, and your income that you need to qualify has to be between $100,000 and $130,000 a year. That can be taken into consideration as a couple, but if you're buying a house yourself, you're supposed to be making that much money, I guess. I guess the rates aren't that great either, but it's like, in 2 years I went from looking at houses. I was really trying to get myself ready to buy, and I was getting close, and like I could probably go get a house right now with my credit score the way it is, and the savings and the income. I could probably go get a house, depending on obviously the price, not the average $400,000 house for sure, but I just 2 or 3 years ago, the houses I was looking at that I was okay with living in, like, okay, I can afford this. I'm okay with living there. Now the house I can afford, I don't want to live there. It's not good enough for me. That's not what I want to spend the majority of my money on for decades. You know, it's not, that has shifted. So either that has to level out and become more realistic, or I have to start making a lot more money, or both. So, and there's something I want to talk about in another episode once I get more educated on it, where I can actually talk about it and know what I'm saying. There's a technique that I've been learning about when it comes to credit, line of credit, and basically a much better way of getting a home than your typical 30-year mortgage, you know. So I'm already making the moves to start that. I've already made one small baby step to start that process. And I have a few backup plans too, like different types of mortgages that I could get into, where owning a house is a little bit more realistic financially than to just have some $2,000 mortgage over my head. I'm not really okay with that. So, yeah, I will talk about that at some point when I get a little bit more educated on it. But for now, that is the end of episode 2 of Subsurface Podcast. And yeah, I didn't mean to get all like emotional there in the middle, but it happens. I like to have things raw and honest and transparent. And this whole podcast, the whole idea of this podcast is to basically talk about things that most people, from what I've gathered, this is observations I've made over the last like 10 years or so, that there's a lot of times people have things they need to talk about. They don't actually want to talk about it with their partner, their coworkers, a lot of times with their closest friends sometimes. They don't want to talk about it with a therapist, or their family. So it's just a lot of people will share things online. They'll chime in and say, oh yeah, I went through the same thing. I relate to this and that. And they share these things online and they talk about it. They converse because they're strangers, They just have a profile picture and a fake name and they're willing to talk about it. So my whole idea was to start a podcast doing essentially that, and then having the comment sections and also a Discord started up where people can just talk back and forth about these things and be more open about it and learn about from whatever we're talking about. Me 15 years ago would love to listen to this podcast right now. So I'm hoping there's other people out there like that. So that's the end of it for now. Episode 2, Subsurface. I prefer episode 3 to be with a partner as well. I haven't decided on who yet. There's a few people that had some interest. And I think that would be a good idea to kind of alternate between a solo podcast and having a guest on. So that is it. Episode 2 is over. Thanks for watching and listening. And I'll see you guys on the next one.